Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we discuss decoding government pensions, your top 5 questions answered. Today we're going to answer your top 5 government pension questions, and we're going to use a case study by using good old Florida. You guys know I'm down here in Florida, and we're going to use the Florida retirement system to answer these top 5 questions. Hopefully you'll be able to use this case study to answer those questions for your own pension. But those questions are: how much will my government pension be when I retire? What factors influence the calculation of my government pension? Can I retire early and still receive my full government pension? Are government pensions inflation adjusted over time? And our fifth and final question is: what is the best age to start receiving a government pension? And for us to be able to know how much anyone's pension is going to be when they retire, there's a few things that most of us need to figure out. Number one is it's going to normally be based on your years of service. So we need to know how many years that you've worked that are qualified. Now, normally your qualified years are going to be the same as your working years. Now, there are some one-off circumstances. Maybe you received a promotion and you had a different classification, where maybe some of those years did not count towards that particular pension system. And I will use the Florida retirement system to give you an example of that. But for most of us, the years that we worked are the years that qualify for our pensions. And then once you have your years of credible service, you need something called a pension multiplier. That number can vary, but in Florida, if you are a regular class, that pension multiplier is 1.6%. If they are considered a special risk member, that pension multiplier is 3.0%. So one of those two will be your pension multipliers in the state of Florida. You will need to see in your own state what your pension multiplier is. After you have a pension multiplier, you then need to multiply your years of service by that pension multiplier. So in Florida, and I'll put a chart up so you can see it, if you had 20 years of service, then 1.6% times 20 will be 0.32. 30 years of service will be 0.48. 40 years of service will be 0.64. 50 years of service will be 0.80. And that is with a pension multiplier of 1.6%. Now, if we change that pension multiplier to 3.0%, that's almost double of the 1.6. So it's basically how each of the numbers are going to turn out. But you will see that 20 years of service will give you 0.6, 30 years of service will give you 0.9, 40 years of service will give you 1.2, and 50 years of service will give you 1.5. And that is if you are a special risk member, you would receive a 3.0% pension multiplier in the state of Florida. You then take that number and multiply it by your average annual compensation. And in the state of Florida, that's your top 5 years of earnings. That is what you would take the average of, your top average 5 years. So for most people, it's going to be the last 5 years that you work. And for this case study, we're going to assume that we made $60,000 over the highest 5 years of earnings. That's what we averaged each year. And then we're going to multiply that $60,000 by that previous number we got, which basically tells us what percentage of our salary are we going to receive as our pension on an annual basis. And so you'll see when we took our 20 years of service and multiplied that by 0.16, we got 0.32. So that means 32% of my $60,000 salary is what I'm going to receive as my pension. And that number is $19,200 or $1,600 a month. For 30 years of service, you saw we had 0.48. Well, that means we will receive almost 50% of our salary. And you can see that that number is $28,800 per year is what we'd receive in our pension, or $2,400 a month. For 40 years of service, we have 0.64. So that means I receive 64% of my salary. So I would receive $30,400 per year as my pension, or $3,200 a month. If I had 50 years of service, I would get to keep 80% of my annual salary for my top 5 years. And so that would be $48,000 or $4,000 per month. And that will be our calculation for our regular class in the state of Florida. We also have what we call special risk. And for those, you would receive 3%. So you'll see that if we had the same $60,000, you would have received 60% of your salary for 20 years of service, or $36,000 or $3,000 per month. You can see with 30 years of service in that special risk category that you actually would have received 90% of your salary. So you would have received $54,000 not working at all, which is pretty spectacular. 40 years of service, you would actually make more retired than you did working. You would have received $60,000 per year as your salary, and you would have made $72,000 per year as a pension. Now, with that said, it's not actually very common in Florida to be special risk for 40 years, and that's part of the reason that the number is much higher. You'll see when we go into the details that even the age of being, quote, fully retired so you can receive your full pension, that number is much lower when you're special risk. And sometimes that's because you started off at a different position. And once you went into special risk, you were already at a certain age, a certain level of your career. So it just wasn't possible for you to work that many years. Also, the work that you do, maybe it's something that burns people out. It's not something that you can do for a very long time. There's probably a variety of reasons. But what we can say is it's not very common for someone to have 40 years under special risk. So if you had a special risk classification, you can see that 50 years of service, you would have had 1.5 of your salary, which is $90,000. you received 150% of what your annual salary was. And while that number is pretty cool, and many of us are probably thinking, maybe I should find out what a special risk position is in Florida so that I can get that 3% multiplier. The reality is at some point in time, you're actually making less money working than you would have retired. So I don't know if you would have worked another 10 years, right? Because that's basically what we're saying. At 40 years of service, you already would have made 120% of your salary. So you are actually working every single day and making less money than if you just retired. And then if you worked another 10 years, sure, you'd have 150% of your salary in retirement. But again, that means that you literally were making $30,000 less going into work every single day, grinding it out, than if you just retired and received a pension. For the second question, what factors influence the calculation of my government pension? We've already gone over most of the factors. And so, you know, your years of service, you know, whatever that pension multiplier is, and whatever your highest 5 years annual compensation. Those are going to be the three levers that you have. Now, it is worth noting in the state of Florida, we had some law changes, and that may impact your overall pension as well. So, for example, in Florida on July 1st, 2011, we changed how many years you have to work to be considered fully vested. If you were someone who was in the Florida retirement system before July 1st, 2011, then the magic number for you is 5. You need 5 credible years to be fully invested in the Florida retirement system so that you'll be eligible to receive a pension. They only needed your top 5 earning years to calculate what your average annual compensation would be. Also, that magic number goes from 5 to 8. So now you have to work for 8 years of the Florida retirement system to be eligible for the pension program. You also now have to take your 8 highest average years of earnings to calculate what your average annual earnings is. And the way I often tell people, because people will say, okay, Dre, is that better or worse? I would tell people anytime there's a new iteration in your plan, it's almost always going to reduce the benefits. They're either taking into consideration the fact that people make more, they're living longer, or the costs are high, or whatever it is. Most of the times, 99.99999% of the time, if there is an adjustment to your plan, they are going to be reducing the benefits. So if you're someone who was in the system already before July 1st, 2011, congratulations. If you're someone who entered the Florida retirement system afterwards, then know that while your option may not be as good as those who were in it before 2011, I promise you that your plan will be better than those who enter after whenever the next adjustment that they make, because it's always going to be made slightly worse. Another factor that can influence your government pension is the payout method that you choose. So it's important to know that these pensions are annuities. And for those that don't know, annuities have literally been around for thousands of years. There's records for soldiers in Roman empires where they received something very similar to an annuity. An annuity is just a guaranteed income for life, which is exactly what the Florida retirement system is. That is a pension plan that is sponsored by an insurance company where there's actuaries who calculate how long everybody's supposed to live, and then it calculates what the overall benefit should be to make sure that that pension system is able to keep working forever. And so whether you get your own annuity and create your own pension plan, or you have the one in your government program and then they have the annuity through the insurance company, you get to choose between a variety of payouts. Now, the Florida retirement system has 4 payout methods, and that's going to impact how much you would receive. And the way it works is you will receive the highest benefit based on the most risk that you're willing to take, and you'll receive the lowest benefit based on the least amount of risk that you're going to take. Option 1 is a life-only income benefit. That means that it's only based on your life. Whatever that monthly income is, it's based on how long you're alive. So if you're going to receive $3,000 a month, that's what you're going to receive for the rest of your life. If you die the day after you retire, then that's it. The Florida retirement system gives nobody else any money. Because you're taking on that much risk, they give you the most amount of money for the single life only payout. Now, there are ways to mitigate this risk. If you are interested in handling it on your own, then you can go and get your own insurance policy on your life. And then what happens is you have the monthly income that's coming out for the rest of your life. And then if something happens to you and you were to die early where you didn't receive much of a benefit, your spouse would then receive the insurance money, and then they are able to have their own pension if they want. They can go buy one, or they could just take the money and invest it and live off of the interest. But you've been able to mitigate the risk on your own within your own family. And so now you're able to get the maximum amount from the Florida retirement system while still making sure your spouse isn't hung out to dry if for some reason you die prematurely. Option number 2 is the life with 10 years certain. And so that number, you're going to receive less than life only because you're starting to give some of the risk in the insurance company. What happens is if for some reason you were to die before 10 years of receiving your monthly payout, the insurance company would say, hey, don't worry about it. We will give that payment amount to whoever your beneficiary is for the next 10 years. And if something happens to your spouse, we're still on the hook for 10 years. So we'll pay it to your children. We can have a contingent beneficiary. Someone is going to receive a monthly payment for 10 years, whether it's you, your spouse, your children, or grandchildren, someone is going to receive it Because you have that certainty, you're going to receive less than a life only because the insurance company is taking on more risk than you are. You have a little bit of certainty where you're at a minimum going to get 10 years of a payment out. Option number three in the flow retirement system is often considered the lover's option. And what that is your spouse is going to receive 100% of your retirement benefit if something happens to you. So whether it's you or your spouse, whatever your monthly amount is, everybody's going to get that payment every single month for the rest of their life based on both of your lives. Now, this amount tends to give the lowest payout for your pension because you are not taking much risk at all. The insurance company is taking all the risk. It's based on you and your spouse's life. And you'll be surprised when you're looking at couples, the likelihood of one of the two of you living to 90. So as a result, I'm going to give the smallest payout. Now, these payout differences are going to relatively be the same, whether you were to go through your Florida retirement system and take the pension through them, and then they would go through the insurance company, or whether you went to the insurance company directly or with your own guaranteed annuity, you will still see that same difference where the highest payout is going to be for your life only, the second highest payout is going to be a 10-year period certain, and the smallest payout is normally going to be 100% of the benefit paid to the survivor. Now, in Florida, we have a fourth payout option, which is probably not super common across the board, but we have one that's called the 2/3 benefit paid to survivors. So this was not 100% paid to the survivor, but when the primary person passes, the spouse will receive 2/3 of the benefit. So to make the math easy for me, let's say you're going to receive $1,800 per month for your retirement, and you chose the option 4 2/3 option. So when you pass, your spouse would have received $1,200 a month. They would have received 2/3 of your benefit. You had $1,800. Your spouse gets $1,200. The 100% benefit, you get $1,800. Your spouse get $1,800. The life only, you get $1,800. Your spouse gets nothing. And then for the 10-year period certain, if you live past 10 years, you get $1,800. Your spouse gets nothing. If you die before 10 years, you get $1,800, and then your spouse gets $1,800. And because the amount of risk you're taking on each of the options is different, it changes how much you're going to receive. Again, remember, the more risk that you take on, the higher the amount that you get. The less risk you take on, the lower amount that you're going to get. Now, it doesn't mean you have to literally take on the risk. We can leverage other avenues to make sure that you can take care of your spouse and possibly still receive the largest payout amount, but it requires a little bit of planning ahead of time to make sure that we qualify for some of these strategies. Question number three is, can I retire early and still receive my full pension benefits? So to answer this question, we really have to know what's considered a normal retirement versus what's considered an early retirement. So your normal retirement, I'll put the information on the screen for you. If you were someone who was in the system before July 1st, 2011, then for you to receive your full pension benefits, you would need to be vested, which as we mentioned was 5 years of work and 62 years of age when you retire. Or you can have 30 years of credible service before the age of 62, and then you would still be considered fully retired and eligible for your full pension. If you were someone who entered after July 1st, 2011, then you would need to be 65 years of age. So you see that number increased by 3 years, and then you would still need to be vested, which was 8 years for someone who entered the system after July 1st, 2011. Or you can have 33 years of credible service before the age of 65. So again, that number is 3 years higher. If you're someone in that special risk classification that we talked about, then for you to receive your full retirement pension benefits, you would need to be the age of 55 and fully invested. So again, that's 5 years of service and then the age of 55. Or you have 25 years of special risk class service before the age of 55. Or you could be 52 and have a combined total of 25 years of special risk class service and up to 4 years of active duty wartime military service. Or you can have 30 years of any credible service before the age of 62. That is for you to receive your full retirement pension benefits with that 3% multiplier. Now that you know what is considered a normal retirement, let's talk about what happens if you retire early. In the state of Florida, you would have to be fully vested and within 20 years of your normal retirement date. And so for someone who's before July 1st, 2011, we know that that number is 62. And we know for someone after July 1st, 2011 in the state of Florida, that you would need to be 65. So within 20 years of that would mean that you need to be either 42 or 45. If you're within 20 years, then you're allowed to retire early. Now, the question is, does that impact my benefits? Yes, it does. It says your benefit is reduced by 5% for each year you were under your normal retirement age. And that any partial year that you were under your normal retirement age is prorated on a month-to-month basis. So in this case, that would be 5/12 of 1% for each month. Because what we're doing there is we're taking that 5% that you would lose each year, and then we're dividing that percentage across all 12 months. And then however many months that you miss, that will be the prorated amount. So as you see, you would not be eligible to receive your full retirement pension if you retire early. Now the number can vary, but it is 5% for each year. So for the case study that we've been using, if you're making that $60,000 a year and you're someone who were looking at retiring at 20 years of service, but now let's say you retired at 15 years of service instead. So you retired 5 years earlier than you expected. You would receive a 5% penalty for each year, which amounts to $80 off of what your pension amount would have been. So instead of receiving $1,600 a month, you would have only received $1,200 a month. You would have lost $80 for each year, 5 years early. That is $400 total. And we're going to use that same example for a special risk person. For them having 20 years, they were going to receive $3,000 a month. And then the same 5% each year that they would have lost would have actually been $150 that they would have lost for each year that they would have retired early. And so for 5 years, that means that $750 that they would have lost, which means instead of them receiving $3,000 a month, they would have received $2,250 a month. So as you can see, you're not going to be eligible to receive your full retirement benefits if you retire early. Now, again, this is me using the Florida retirement system. So you're going to want to look at your own individual state, but normally you can just Google whatever the state that you're in and the pension program's name, and then whatever it means to retire early. And then it will normally tell you what that penalty will be. And then you can calculate what that amount is and see whether it makes sense for you. Question number 4, are government pensions inflation adjusted over time? Now that is going to vary by state, and it definitely depends. So the state of Florida, that is no longer the case if you enter the Florida retirement system after July 1st, 2011. If you're someone who was already in the system before July 1st, 2011, then yes, you currently have an inflation adjusted benefit where that amount will go up, and not necessarily one for one with inflation, but it does go up where it's a percentage of inflation over each year. And so you do have a portion of security when it comes to maintaining your purchasing power, which is a very fancy way of saying I can buy the same amount of stuff that my pension allowed me to buy when I first retired when I'm 20 years into my retirement. And as you guys know, if you don't have a number that keeps up with inflation, what we're basically saying is every 17 to 20 years, your purchasing power cuts in half. So if you were able to live on your lifestyle with $1,000 a month in this current environment, that means in 20 years, you would have needed $2,000 to live off that same amount. And so without that cost of living adjustment for those entering after 2011, you're going to have to make some sort of adjustment to your overall retirement plan because the pension is going to be less effective as you get older. You and I both know that the price of things like gas and food, even just this year to last year, where the price of milk and other groceries has gone up significantly. And if your pension does not give you the ability to protect your purchasing power, then that means you're going to want to have some sort of investments to at least keep up with inflation to offset what your pension is. You still have the benefit of a pension. You're still going to receive that base amount of money, but you're going to want to add something onto that so that way you can increase with inflation and maintain the exact same lifestyle that you have currently. Question number 5 is, what is the best age to start receiving my government pension? Now, this answer really does depend a lot on you. Ideally, if you just simply want to answer it from a dollar and cents perspective, then if you're able to work until you receive your full retirement benefits, go for it. If you're able to calculate your retirement lifestyle, how much money you needed, and you're able to see, well, if I work an additional 3-5 years or something like that, I'm going to get a pension that matches that lifestyle. When you take my Social Security and other incomes into consideration, then maybe it makes sense for you to do that. But if you're someone who's stressed out, maybe you have new management where the last manager retired and the new manager is kind of a butt, and you don't want to deal with that, or maybe you're concerned about your overall health and you're just not really sure how much of your retirement you're going to get to enjoy if you work another 3 to 5, 10 years, then I would say let's go ahead and retire because your time is the most valuable asset that you have. You're going to receive another check every single month, no matter what. You've already qualified for a pension, so we're really only having a conversation about how much money you're going to receive, but it does mean that you're always going to receive money every month. You don't get to add more time. Whenever our hourglass runs empty, that thing is empty. There's no way for us to buy more time, but we're always going to get more money. And so for many people, it might make sense based on your health or your goals and just different situations to retire early. For others, I know it's not even their health, it's their spouse's health, or it's just draining them because they're spending so much time helping them. Or maybe their kids had kids, so now you're a grandparent and you really want to be there for them. You want to be able to move into the house and help them out and kind of be the stay-at-home nanny. I mean, there's so many reasons outside of dollars and cents to make this decision. And that's why I often tell people that wealth is so much more than riches. But it doesn't mean we don't ignore the financial aspect of it. It just means that we put it in the right perspective. The way I often tell people is peace of mind does have a cost. I know we say peace of mind is priceless, and in many ways it is, but it does have a cost, and I can calculate it for you. And then you can decide whether that makes sense. Where you say, you know what, Dre, that's worth it for me. I'm willing to go ahead and make this decision that gives me peace of mind, even though it may cost me $1,000 a month. And I would say, sure, that's great, because peace of mind does have a cost. It's $1,000 a month, but that's worth it for you. Then go for it. But my goal is for you to always make an informed decision. I want you to know how much peace of mind costs, and I want you to be able to say, that's worth it for me. And if for some reason the number gives you anxiety, then maybe that's not going to give you peace of mind. Maybe you're really worried about how the numbers are going to match up at the end of the month. So let's go ahead and see if we can bridge the gap. Maybe we can find the happy middle. There's a lot that goes into building the perfect retirement plan. But the thing about a perfect retirement plan is it's different for each of us. And so you have to be honest with yourself and see what matters to you the most. And then we can create a plan that achieves those goals for you because you deserve it in your retirement. If you found value in this video, I simply ask for you to like and subscribe so you can continue receiving valuable insights on how to create your own wealthy retirement system so that you can worry less and live more. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.